and you're welcome to go ahead. Whenever you want to, you can just indicate, and I'll pose some of the questions that come through from our attendees as well. All the best to you.
Thank you so much. I like your opening and your statement as your background, when you actually said we are coming from different backgrounds. We are actually coming from different religions. We have different belief systems, and well, we have been indoctrinated, colonized in one way or another. But there's one thing that we'll have to understand and also respect, is that we are all human beings. Now, human beings in the sense that when we were born by different parents, and these different parents themselves as well have actually different backgrounds. Now, coming to the religions, there's one book which I actually published in isiZulu, where I was talking about various world religions when I was still an associate professor at Cedar City campus in Johannesburg, where I analyzed all the religions. I'll just tap into few. If you look into Buddha, he has his own ways of analyzing who are we, which resulted into what we call Buddhism. And we go to Krishna, and where we find actually Hinduism, and we find Christianity, which with its own principles and so on. But in a nutshell, all these religions are looking at a human being. Now, Jean-Paul Sartre, one of the well-known and highly respected French philosopher, he actually looked into beings. He first said, there is a being in itself, there is a being for itself, and there is a being for others. And these three beings, they are very much related, and they speak to one another in one way or another. As I'm sitting here as I call myself a Zulu African person. You might be my brother or my sister sitting there as a white, English or Afrikaans, but African person. As an Indian, but an African person. Which is very exciting, that almost at the end of the day, no matter how you describe yourself, you always add that name, African. And what the chairperson actually said was that at the end of the day, we are all spiritual beings. You know, this morning I just happened to, you know, when I was doing my matric, maybe some of you knows it or some of you don't know it. When I was doing my matric in 1975, there was an Afrikaans book that was prescribed for us, which was in the celebration of 100 years for C.J. Langenhoven. And it's titled The Erwe van Onze Vader. And in that book, that's where we find a poem, not a song, a poem, which is The Stem van Zuid-Afrika. If you read that poem, it's only de Villiers, Emile de Villiers, who actually turned it into music, but it was a poem. Now, that poem, if you read the first paragraph, that's what we took out of it, a Diplo van Onze Hemel. We took only the first paragraph. We left the rest of the paragraphs. If you read the rest of the paragraphs, of which most of us haven't read it thoroughly and deeper, you will find that in one way or another, the Afrikaans-speaking people vowed and cursed that the land will belong to us, and we will fight for it in one way or another, which is a way of saying we will continue with the indoctrination, or we will continue with the colonization. Now, with that background in mind, we are coming from the apartheid era. Now we are in democracy. The question is, what is democracy? Democracy is where we must, one, all of us know each other, understand each other, and also respect our religions, belief systems, and whatever the case may be. But at the same time, there are these structures which of which one of the strongest structure is the school. Why am I saying the school? It is the school because the school is a continuation of a family. It is part of the community. Unfortunately, the person that is responsible in that school is a teacher. Because I, as a parent, I drop off my child in the hands of a teacher, and the teacher also is what? It's a parent. Now, the biggest challenge of a teacher as a parent is that he is going to deal with a number of beliefs here which are coming with these kids. And also he or she will have to understand slowly and learn the backgrounds and also where these kids are coming from. Now here comes this child who will start crying at school, start doing funny things, start doing something that we will perceive as something that is actually disturbing. It is only and only then where I'm asking a question, which is actually our today's topic, where I'm saying, is it the spark of the ancestral flames which we see in our ancestral, in our African peoples at school? Why I'm asking that? Because we as African people, I'll talk about Black African people. Our background is that our forefathers used to use or to live on agriculture, cattle, using herbs, which is muti, and a number of things. Now, what you will find is that maybe my mother or my father was supposed to accept the ancestral call, but he or she didn't do that. And that will actually now flow down to me or down to the generation, as we always know it in the Bible, that all the sins of the parents will flow to the next generation. Now, when this happens, the question is it really ancestors? Or is it just maybe some of the evil energies that are going around, whatever the case may be? Now, I don't know how many of you, as I can't see you now, who are actually Zulu-speaking people and so on, because there's what we call indigi. Indigi is just, you know, it's only something that indicates that you have that kind of an influence from your parents, which just needs to be cleansed, and that's it. That's the first one. The second one is where really it is now a bouncing down to a child of that ancestral calling that the child must actually accept. But it's not necessarily an issue of accepting it. There are ways not of avoiding that, but of putting down a request to the ancestors. Normally we take a goat, you go to Msamo, which is our African altar, where you speak to the ancestors and say, look, the child is still young. We are requesting that please bear with the child. Yes, we have actually seen that, and please let's wait for the child to grow and become an adult, and therefore you can do whatever you want to do. But what you find today, those kinds of things of interventions, they don't happen. I must accept it. I'm also a traditional healer, but most of our own traditional healers today, they don't do that. Why? Because we are actually all after money. You find that here's a child that you can put a request, you can teach or direct or educate or advise the parents, but you don't do that. You rush on saying the child must take what is called ikobongo. Ikobongo is a particular concoction of which the child must drink. And then when that ikobongo fails, and then you start saying, oh no, that child must go and twasa, be initiated. Of which I'm very against of. It's very wrong. Even though the ancestral calling used to happen, it's not new, even though it used to happen in the olden days, there were interventions, as I've already alluded into it now. But we overlook that. Now, the second point is that when that happens at school again, it's not only the ancestral calling. Guys, please, let's allow the truth. Let us speak the truth so that we'll be able to be the greatest leaders and teachers. You know, today, When I was a teacher, it was in 1980 until 1982. Things were completely not exactly as they are today. Today, everybody wants to be in a position. You want to be an HOD, you want to be a principal, you want to be whatever, subject teacher, whatever. Let's face the fact. Teachers are using multi at schools in order for me to get into that position. Now, we are dealing with youngsters, of which it's very easy for them to pick up those things. You might find a child crying, running around at school, not because of that being an ancestral spirit or core, but the child is feeling that. We've had many a times where I've got an example at Wamashu where kids were pointing at the school principal saying, look, he has got some snakes, he has got some evil things, of which he's sitting as a principal using that. I have got another example in Lady Smith, where actually also you find, where we find kids saying that, no, we are not comfortable at school. It happened in a white school in Glen Vista in Johannesburg, where school children or people were actually seeing some funny things at school. So all those kinds of things. So that is why it's very difficult now to say, is it a spiritual calling, or is it just maybe kids are picking up something? But all at all is that the teachers must actually try to work with the parents. And also, this is my thinking, that if I'm a teacher, I'm a Christian who do not believe in ancestral issues and whatever, but as a parent, I must put that aside and try to assist this young child, and also try to assist the parents and say, maybe, parents, can you try to assist your child and whatever? Yesterday, I was talking to Mr. Sangweni, who was the principal of Ohlange High School. And we were discussing the very same issue. He said to me, you know, Kabazela, when I was a school principal, it happened to me with 21 students. What I did, I called the parents. As an African principal, I said to the parents, could you go and consult? Could you go and assist? But with the legal knowledge that I have, this is what I think you guys should do, maybe, and so on and so on. And, you know, out of 21, 19 of those kids were actually sorted out, and then they came back to school, and then they continue with their life. All what I would actually warn here is that parents must not take their kids to the sangomas. I repeat that, because automatically the sangoma will say the child must take the Ikobongo concoction, and at the same time, if the Ikobongo concoction fails, the child must twasa. That is why you are finding a lot of kids now running around with amapai and so on. At the end of the day, you find that their future is dead, or there's nothing happening at the end of the day. So what excites me is that NAPTOSA as an organization, where there are a number of teachers who are actually there, all what I would like to say is that, for instance, because there are three stakeholders here. It is the school, the teacher, and the Department of Education. And then we add the union, which is like NAPTOSA. But we have actually seen many a times the Department of Education not doing anything about this. I think maybe let me stop there, allow some questions, and some other issues will flow as I address the questions.
Professor, thanks for that. At the moment, we only have one question that's come in from Rashida. And she says, good afternoon, I'm a teacher for years, and I would like to know, why does it seem like there's an increase in the number of learners who has received this calling in recent years?
Thank you so much. You are 100% correct. The increase is not an increase. The increase is because of what I've already alluded to, that it is not all of those young kids that are actually being possessed by these ancestral spirits. It's not all of them, it's very few. But all what happens here is that, let me give you an example for argument's sake. With us Black African people, the surname plays a major role. Let's say here is a child, which is very common today. A child is coming from two parents who are not married. Remember, you are a mater-paternal product. But if the mater and the paternal and the maternal, they didn't do anything, that child belongs to the maternal side. That child must use the maternal side surname. In other words, the mother's surname. Now, what you'll find is that I can guarantee you between 50 to 60% of the kids at the school we are teaching, they've got wrong surnames in the sense that they are carrying their father's surnames instead of carrying their mother's surnames, also, which is a mistake, or maybe a mistake purposely done by the Department of Health and the Department of Home Affairs and the hospitals, because most of the parents are forced by the hospitals, forcing the mothers to call their kids by their father's surname, whereas they know exactly that nothing has been done, the parents are not married. And that is the biggest issue. You will find that the child will be affected at school, not because it's an ancestral spirit, but it's because of the surname. That's the first one. The second one, what you will find that maybe on the maternal side, okay, two parents are married, thoroughly married, well married, but on the maternal side or paternal side, there is a kind of a problem in the family. And that problem will actually escalate down to a child. And instead of the parents to go and check what happened, some of them, they know exactly what happened, but they won't tell it to the teachers. They won't discuss it with the teachers that this is the problem. So all what I'm saying is that we as parents, we have got this problem of living in denial. We know what are the causes of these things. So that kind of increase, to me, it's wrong. It's not a proper increase in terms of ancestral callings, but it's an increase in terms of what those kids are coming with at schools. And therefore, it gets misinterpreted and that it's ancestral calling. And also the Sangomas, they do the very same thing. So what I would like to see happening there, that is why I initially said the teacher must be very patient in calling the parents and say, look, guys, we all have history, of which I think maybe you know it partly, and ask some couple of questions. Are you married, or are you this, or whatever, some kind of counseling, and therefore say, look, why don't you go and sort out this, or why don't you go and try and fix this, because look, this child is disturbing other kids at school, of which is not supposed to happen.
Thanks for that, Prof. I actually have now received quite a number of questions. I'm not sure if you'd like to field at least 3 more.
Yes.
Okay, let me pose the 3 questions to you at once and then give you an opportunity to respond. Good. So the first question is from Nicola. If you say learners should not consult a Sangoma, then who should they be consulting?
Good.
All right, the next one. Is there an acceptable age to be initiated into this ancestral or spiritual calling? And how is it possible to determine whether it is actually an ancestral or spiritual calling? That's from Feroz. And the last one we'll field for now is what do we do if parents don't believe or agree that the child needs help in this regard?
Thank you, Chair. Let me start with the last question. It's a tough and unfortunate one, because at the end of the day, the buck stops with the parents. Chair, and also our colleagues here this afternoon, is that we must understand what is to be a parent. Yes, it's good to be a parent, to have your own belief systems and to be in a particular religion. But at the end of the day, I think we have to understand what is a religion. As I was born, when I was born not carrying any religion. but born by parents in a particular religion. And so it means I was introduced in that religion. When I was introduced in that religion, that's fine. So my parents had to guide me in that religion. Like, for instance, like myself, I was born in a Catholic family, Roman Catholic family, and I grew up like that. So, but I cannot call myself a Catholic. I'm a Zulu. But by religion, I'm a Catholic. But if now things are hitting me, not as a Catholic, but as a Zulu, an African Zulu, it means my parents, that's the first thing that must come to them. And I've mentioned earlier on that there's a problem. Most of those parents, you will find that they are denying something that they know. I've been in practice in this work of mine. This is my 18th year. Whenever a woman comes into a Sigodlweni, I ask her, are you aware of this? She will start by saying, no. Have you been to a Sangoma? No. But when I start saying, but look, this is what is said, and so on, she will start saying, oh no, I'm sorry, Babu Mkhize. Yes, I've been, but I was scared. But she started by denying, by saying it's not there. So all what I would request is that maybe teachers must try to help the parents and say, look, if you are refusing this, are you not aware that you are actually destroying a young child of which maybe one day she or he will be a greatest scientist, or maybe the one of the greatest leaders in the country we don't know? You know, those basic questions. And then let me go to Nicola. Nicola, yes, I don't encourage parents to go and consult to Sangoma. Even at myself, at Mlambo Munye, I chase them away. Because automatically, Nicola, you can even practice. You go to any Sangoma and whatever with your child, the first thing will be saying she must take the concoction, Ikobongo, she must toss, and so on, rather than to get a help that will help the child. Now, I have devised this system that if the child is affected, let parents put together 2 candles. It's in one of my books. Put a dish, enamel dish, in the middle of the white candles with water. Let the parent go there and say, Nina Badala, is there a problem with a child? If there is a problem, what is the problem? How can we sort it out? Now, there's another problem here. If the child gets now and again tormented by dreams, parents must listen to those dreams. Because those dreams, it's easy to interpret them and realize, oh no, this is a proper ancestral calling. And therefore they must take the goat and go to the altar and say, please, we request that this, please wait for the child, and so on, as I've already initially said that. So yes, you can go and consult, but I don't encourage it that much, because automatically I know what is the expectation. Maybe use that method, it will assist you. On the other side, parents must be honest and be genuine. You know, let me give you an example about myself. The calling to me came at the age of 49. After I've worked in big companies, got some degrees, 5 degrees, and so on. But there's one thing now, you know, when I recall, my mother used to say, you, Victor, when you were born, you had a veil. And I said, Mommy, what was the meaning of that? Then she explained to me and said, no, look, it might happen that you came with the older people and you might one day be called. To me, I couldn't understand. First thing, I lost the job at the SABC. I opened the business, it went down. And when I was in an aeroplane flying to Joburg, I sat next to this Nissan HR director. I got the employment there. Then I said, what's going on? That's how I moved to Joburg. And in Joburg, now I got jobs, and in each and every job, NISA, Human Science Research Council, Appletech, Post Office, I could not even in each and every of these high position, general manager, executive, even spend a year or 18 months. I was jumping. And I was excited, saying that, oh no, I'm in demand, and so on. Whereas now that was the beginning of the story, until when I got that Sportnet, I got fired straight away. So when I got fired, one of the guys, fortunately, he was actually learned yet an MSc. He said to me, Mkhize, I think you have got something of which you have to attend to. And then that's how the whole thing started. I never went for consultation or whatever the case may be. Okay, and then let me go to a question on terms of acceptable age. Look, I must tell you that as I started at the age of 49, it depends when it comes. But all what I'm saying here, if the child is young, we can go and plead. We can go and request. For me, it is I would say it's not acceptable to initiate a child who is below 21. And also, there's another thing that I must warn. No one tells you that you must go and NAPTOSA. No one must tell you that you must be initiated. It comes through a dream, and some of the people have got visions during the day. You get told. And also, there's another thing that I must also mention is that NAPTOSA comes in different ways. There are times where you are taken to the river, they throw you into the river. There are times where they do it themselves through dreams without going anywhere. There are times where they show you the place where to go. You will dream that place, you will dream even the person that go to that woman, go to that old man, and that's where you'll be initiated. But no one can tell you that you must be initiated. I cannot tell you, Veros, that when you come to me and say, yes, you must be initiated, or no ways. It doesn't work like that. But today it's very common. Why? Because the whole thing is commercial.
Thanks, Prof. I'm just going to, through you, pose two more questions and allow you to continue, because I think it is relevant at the moment. I've noticed that in our Q&A, we've received a question from both a psychologist, that's Vanessa Cross, as well as a social worker, Portia. Now, they both asked very similar questions because, as you said from the outset, that there's a lot of cultural understanding that needs to come in here. And with regard to Vanessa, who is the psychologist, she says that she is in the Western Cape. And one of the problems that they have is that when this chaos arises at schools due to the so-called ancestral callings that the child experiences, what exactly do they do from a psychologist's point of view when parents don't necessarily want to accept what is going on, and how then do you intervene as a psychologist? And she says she believes that it's important to understand and respect the various religious convictions, and that's why this talk is pertinent. And then Portia says that, well, she says something very similar, but she says that most parents actually are denying that there is an ancestral calling from their children. So I just wanted to see what your response would be to that. And from our side, Prof, perhaps if you would also be able to touch on where the ancestral calling takes place on a large scale level, where you've got numerous learners at school in one instance that are now affected and reacting to this.
Come again with your last one.
I'm saying, you know, we have many experiences with schools where there are a number of learners that in one given moment start to react to this type of calling. And that is what leaves a lot of educators, principals, as well as the Department of Education throwing up their hands saying, I don't know how to deal with this.
Thank you. Let me start with Vanessa as a psychologist. Vanessa, thank you so much. Umsamo Institute is working with the School of Medicine and Psychiatry at the UKZN, and we are working also with Boston University. There is a funding that we actually about to receive, which is going to be applied in South Africa, where we are actually looking at working with different psychologists, social workers, and so on. Because you see, where a psychologist is needed, it is during the time where, because when these things happen, the child gets traumatized, other kids in the family gets traumatized as well. That's where the intervention of a psychologist is needed. Now, as a psychologist, yes, the psychologist must actually sit down with the parents and interview the parents and say, look, if the child is behaving like this, do you know of anything? You as a father, you as a mother, is there anything that you know from your background, from your history, or whatever the case may be? Because as I've already mentioned, the issue of a surname, you might pick up such things. You might pick up maybe that the mother of the child will say, look, I know exactly that my gogo or my mother had a spiritual calling, but she refused it. And she turned it to be a prayer thing. And you will find a lot of stories. My son, Siabonga, is actually the greatest spiritualist on that. He works very much on that, and he is always on ETV every Tuesday morning at 7:20. And it deals a lot of such issues with the youngsters and what, and so on. I think that's where the psychologists can actually come in assisting. And also, if maybe they've taken a child to a Sangoma, a psychologist also must say, okay, you have been to the Sangoma. What did the Sangoma say? Psychologists must actually try to analyze what the Sangoma said and say, look, what is it that you guys as parents know versus what the Sangoma said? And then psychologists say, but are you aware that there's no balance here? So why don't we work with the balance? Yes, in this work, we need the psychologists, we need the psychiatrists, we need the social workers. Also going to Portia's side on the child, on the denial of the parents. Portia, 80% they deny. But I will agree with those who deny that the child has got a spiritual calling, because it's not always a spiritual calling. It is what I've already said, what the child picks up at school, and also what is wrong with the parents, what happened in the history of the parents. The thing is that we have today is that we are not genuine as parents. We are not the real parents who are parenting our kids properly for them to live forever. Also, I don't know with the other races, is that amongst we Black people, we don't live our own lives. We live the people's lives. We always say, what are the people going to say? Do you understand? It's like me, for instance, where I was going to say, with 5 degrees, what are the academics going to say? But because, I said, I am myself, I am a being for myself, as Jean Paul said that you are a being for yourself, therefore I went for this. I never cared for being a being for others. I'm not the others, but I am myself. So therefore, I said to myself, if it is a genuine and the correct calling, let it be, and it had to happen. So it's basically that. I think also as social workers and as psychologists, it must be a mission that we try to help our parents. We try to teach the parents. And even people in the community say, no, look, this is how things are done or whatever. And also, I think that is where the school plays a major role, as well as churches. Because at churches also, we must explain what is a human being. How is that human being related to another human being, which is a being for itself versus the being in itself and the being for others. So that is actually very critical. Coming to the last one, and in terms of experiences, a number of schools are experiencing one and the same thing. Now, it's unfortunate, colleagues, that I will always blame the government, because you see, we have got the school, we have got the SGB, we have got the unions, we have got the child, we have got the teacher. Why is the Department of Education not drafting, a national policy on these issues and say each and every school must have its own school policy, but based on the national policy, on addressing these issues. I'll give you an example, for argument's sake, of one of the schools. Maybe one of you is from that school here in NAPTOSA, St. John's College in Johannesburg. I know it very well because my son, that's where he studied from grade R to grade 12. You know, what a discipline in that college. One religion. They meet at the hall and they do one religion, one philosophy. That's it. If a child maybe has got something that the child must not cut his or her own hair, whatever, blah, 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 and so on, the parents get called in, and then they sit down with the parent, and then they see how they accommodate that particular child. So why not other schools are not doing that? So it is very easy because these are the 5 stakeholders. So once the school policy is there, the school policy will be supported by the union, will actually be implemented by the school principal together with the teachers for the parents. And also, you know, it's very easy for me if I'm a school principal, if Mr. Dlamini's child is troubling other kids in my school, but parents are in denial, I would say, look, Mama, Baba, I think we'll have to take your child out of the school because we are trying to help you, but you're in denial. This child is disturbing other kids, you know, in a very amicable manner. But what we pick up now in schools is that whenever a child is going out of bizarre, crying and doing all those things, you know what teachers do? They always say, oh, these are demons, you must pray, you must call the priest, you must pray for the child. You know, a whole of halabaloo, to me, which is not a discipline. So, and the whole thing becomes a joke, and the child becomes embarrassed, and then the child becomes traumatized, where now psychologists must come in, you know, and all those sorts of things. So for me, I think from the experience, take a child, for instance, who committed suicide. She committed suicide because the school principal was completely against what she was doing, but that school principal being an African school principal, you know, and he never even wanted to engage the parents. So that's what makes the whole thing be painful. That's what makes the whole thing now be a joke to us as a nation at large.
Thanks for that, Prof. Are you prepared to take a few more questions, or how would you like to?
Yes, okay, yes, I can take more questions.
All right, I've got some interesting questions as I've been moderating. We've got one from Anand Goundin, and he says, good afternoon to you. What will be the departure point for a principal when he addresses 36 parents of children who are showing strong, vigorous displays of ancestral symptoms? That's the one. I'll pose 2 more to you.
In other words, not agreeing that they are there.
I would think so. Or perhaps, okay, all right, we'll take it as that. Then the other one is quite an interesting one where we've got Anonymous who says that he or she has a child of 12 years old in class who has shared that the child is a female, that she has to become a Sangoma because her grandmother is a Sangoma. So she's a bright young lady who wants to pursue her studies, but now she's afraid and anxious because she has a family calling to respond to. Okay, let's take one more.
Okay.
This is from C. Smith, who says, we have had 2 types of scenarios at school. What steps can we take when, firstly, a single learner has an ancestral attack and disrupts the lesson in class? And secondly, when the same thing happens, but this time with multiple learners across the school?
Mm-hmm.
Let's take those for now, Prof.
Okay. Let me start with the last one, where we find one child being attacked at school. As I've already mentioned, I think the first thing that the teacher who is in direct contact with the child must report to the school principal. The school principal must call the parents and say, look, this is what we are picking up with your child. can we give your child maybe about a week, depending on the policy of the school, to go and assist the child in whatever form, maybe in your religion or maybe in your cultural rituals or whatever the case may be, and then bring the child back. I think that's the first option that can be done. The second one is when now you find that it's now something that is happening in the whole school, like at Glen Vista, for instance. It was a number of people who were seeing things in the school. I think in that case, before you bring in a Sangoma, maybe bring in a psychologist, because the psychologist will work with the minds of these young kids in terms of, are these hallucinations or illusions, or what are you actually seeing? Why am I saying a psychologist? Because you see, if each and every parent will take those kids to a Sangoma, automatically I've already said what it would be the answer. The answer will be say, no, take the concoction Kobongo, or you go in Twasa, and whatever the case may be. Let's work it professionally, because now it's in more than 5 number. In other words, more than 5 kids. Now it's in the whole school. Maybe the school has got its own psychologist. Let the psychologist maybe call the kids, let the psychologist call the parents and discuss it with them. Maybe one of the parents will say, no, look, I'm going to speak to my own, to my pastor or to my priest, maybe to attend to this, or whatever the case may be, and then you take it from there. And then the parent also must be open enough to give a report back to the teacher and also to all the school on that particular issue. Coming also to a 12-year-old, I'm not too sure if the child is saying it because she has got some dreams that she will be the one who will take over from her granny who is a Sangoma. That's fine. The only thing that the family must do must actually go to the altar and say, look, yes, we understand you have already spoken to the child that she's going to take over, but can we request that she furthers her education at school and so on and so on until she becomes whatever she wants to be. That's the first scenario. The second scenario is that if she is just saying it herself, it's a different story, because it might happen that that's what she feels alone, which is real or which might not be real. So that is another scenario. Going to the departure point, of where a teacher is talking to 36 parents, but the parents are in denial. That is the unfortunate part, because you see, we seem here to deny something that is there even in the Bible. If you read the Bible carefully, you will find that there were dreamers, and you will find that there were healers. And also, when we say our ancestors, they are demons because they are dead. There's no one who's alive from the Bible. Everybody from the Bible is dead. So I always say, without attacking anyone or criticizing anyone or offending anyone, I always say to myself, how should I know Abraham's ancestors, but I don't know mine? If you go to the Bible to Matthew 1, verse 1, you read there about Jesus Christ, generation, forefathers, and so on, which is right there. Now, what is it that makes me now not also to write down my own ancestors and respect them? Maybe the problem here is that there is this phrase which says, what we do is maybe we make ancestors be our gods. No, that's not the case. We venerate them. We respect them as much as other people in the Bible respected their forefathers and so on and so on. But in a nutshell is that you were not born from the rock, you were born by people. You were born by parents, grandparents, and so on. What do you call those grandparents? In one word, they're ancestors. Simple as that.
Thanks, Prof. I've got a few more, but I'm just checking. I see that some of our attendees also have their hands raised on Zoom, and I am prepared to allow them to unmute and speak. I can unmute the audio for them, but I'm only going to limit that to 3 and a little later on. For now, Prof, with due respect to our attendees, we've got over 79 questions, and we can't possibly go through all of them, but I'm just going to field a few more for you right now, which I believe would be pertinent to more than just the person posing it. With the first one being, how can the Department of Education support schools? And the follow-up to that is, should there be a policy on aspects such as these?
Yes.
Right. And as much as we're talking about whatever we're saying is in the interest of the learner as well, Morgan Aggie says to us that some learners are just pretending. And how do we deal with them if they are just pretending? Because it's very difficult to differentiate between whether they're actually pretending or it is an actual experience that the learners are having. And the last one is from Renee, who says that she has a learner at school who experienced a traumatic event in their life, but is now stating that they're experiencing ancestral callings. Could this actually be a link, or is there something different?
Thank you. Colleagues, let's be honest. The Department of Education, I don't know, I will refer particularly in KZN. When the previous MEC was there, I tried to contact him. Unfortunately, he never did anything. What they did at the end of the day, I presented to them saying, look, guys, involve the union, involve the teachers, involve the parents, and so on, come up with a policy, as I've already said. Instead of that, they called a conference. They wanted papers to be presented. And I challenged them. I said, what are the papers for? Why are we academizing this thing? Because it's simple and straightforward. We don't need any academic thinking in this thing. Fortunately, I don't know, maybe for the gods of KZN, he was kicked out. And then now we have the new MEC. I sent an MEC also a WhatsApp congratulating her and whatever. And then I said, MEC, this is the first issue that I would request you to attend because it's affecting our future young leaders, economically, politically, whatever the case may be. She said, definitely, I'll arrange a meeting with you, Professor Mkhize, we meet. Guess what? Somebody, when I spoke to someone, said, Dr. Mkhize, I'll give you 50,000 if she ever comes back to you. She hasn't come back to me. So the Department of Education, seemingly, to me, I don't know. They're not interested. That is why I'm so excited if people like NAPTOSA, they're taking this up. And also, in a few weeks to come, I'll be talking to SACTI about a very similar issue, saying that, look, guys, it's not only an African child here that is being actually, how can I put it, traumatized or affected. It's the teachers. How can you feel being a teacher, you go to school, you go and teach, but you get disrupted by a child. But at the same time, you can't blame the child because the child also is a child. She has got those kinds of things. You get it? So the person who gets the real pressure here is the teacher. So it means the department doesn't care about the teacher. Therefore, the unions must come on board and say, hey, department, it means you don't care about our teachers. So for me, definitely the policy is needed. The unions must pressurize the department and say, department, you must do something because at the end of the day, our teachers are actually getting frustrated, of which is not their job, in other words, to heal those kids. Their job is to get there and teach. And also that child affects the opportunity of the other children in classes, not because those who are doing that, they're stupid or whatever, but because of the circumstances. Now, going to the learners pretending to be that is now when the psychologists must come in and say, interview those kids and also speak to the parents. Now, if the child is pretending, therefore everything will come out. It's very easy to do this. That is why I'm saying people like us, Mkhize, psychiatrists, psychologists, of which we are actually starting at the UKZN with the School of Medicine and Psychiatry, that let's work together. Let's impose discipline to the parents, impose discipline to the Sangomas to say, don't rush for the answer, but rush for what? For help. Rush for helping this family rather than for something that will actually benefit you in terms of cash or in terms of money. Now, coming to the traumatic events, as I've already said it, is that there are kids who are coming from families where the mother and the father, they're beating each other, and also where there's a hell of a noise in the family and all those sorts of things. And then the child gets affected. It is only then when the principal must call the parents and say, just tell me, this is what you're experiencing about your child. Tell us about your background. Tell us about what's going on at school. You know, remember that you are dealing with young brains here. Let's say, for argument's sake, we are talking here about a child who's between grade R and grade 5. Those are very young, which is different from grade 7 upwards, you know. So, you know, a child gets traumatized so easily. Maybe the child saw the father beating the mother, or maybe something happened in the family. And the other thing that I must actually add on here is that we as African people have got special rituals that gets performed. The child might be affected by the non-doing of those rituals. So it's where the teacher must actually speak to the parents and say, but did you do these rituals? No, we don't do rituals. We believe in Jesus Christ, we believe in this and whatever, and say, okay, that's fine, good with your religion, but don't you think this affects your child? Because even if you take your child out of this school, you take your child to another school, the same thing will happen. Same thing will happen. Your child will end up at the end of the day being kicked out of all the schools. I think let me stop there.
Thank you, Prof. Very, very informative indeed. I see Charlene has had her hand raised for quite some time. So Charlene, I'm unmuting you and I'm going to allow you permission to speak. Please unmute yourself on your side and you can pose a question to our speaker. I'm just giving that another second. It doesn't look like Charlene's unmuting herself, but Prof, in the meantime, I was reading some very interesting questions. And what I want to state is that as much as we have many questions, a lot of the questions are actually similar, and some of them are being answered by you as you respond as well. So I'm hoping that everyone is covered. But we did receive a question from one of our NAPTOSA members from a local school, and we are familiar with the school and that it has experienced some of these issues very recently. The question is, what measures must be taken immediately if a number of students have an episode at the same time, which creates panic within the school? Right? That's a pertinent one. We've had that question come to our office quite a number of times recently. And then the other question, which has also recently come up, is that in terms of the ancestral callings and culturally speaking in general, we'll find that sometimes learners arrive at school donning clothing or some kind of attire that is related to the ancestral calling, or perhaps the African or the Zulu culture, and that now may contravene the school code of conduct. How then do schools address those issues as well?
Good.
Okay.
Okay.
Those two. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Let me start with the last one. The school has got its own policies in terms of uniform, in terms of teaching, in terms of attire and everything. I will always side with the school that the school must take its strong point in that all kids must arrive at school with a professional school uniform approved. Now, if the child now happens to have ancestral calling, that she must come with ibai and so on at school, the parents must be called and be told that, yes, we respect the ancestral calling of a child. We respect that the child must wear this, can you go and speak to the ancestors requesting that, okay, what about if the child between 8 and 4, she comes to school not wearing this, and thereafter she can wear that at home? Because let me tell you something, people. There are people who always think that it's difficult to speak to the ancestor. It's very easy. There are people who understand, even though sometimes they can actually be hard, but there are many ways that gets done, the rituals and so on, that gets performed in order to calm them down. So that is very easy. So I would say to the teachers, stick to the code of conduct of the school. Simple as that. But don't embarrass the child by shouting at the child. If maybe you see that the child is actually stubborn with that, keeps on coming, call the parents, speak to the parents. And then come to what can be done immediately at school. I think I've already said that you know, colleagues, there are 2 departments in government. I always tell people that if I can be given those 2 departments, any of those, I can turn them around within 100 days. They are so easy. Department of Arts and Culture, stakeholders are straightforward, and Department of Education. You know where the MECs of Department of Education waste time? Running meetings. Instead of going straight to the schools, go down to the level, speak to the schools, speak to the parents, to the teachers, speak to the kids. 100 days, it's enough, because here we have got the parent, the child, the teacher, the principal, the SGB, and the school, the unions, done. Who else? No one else. So things that must be done immediately. If something erupts at school, the teacher must speak to the principal to the parent. Done. Simple. The parent is not responding, write a letter, take the child away from school. Okay, say, look, I've spoken to a parent, they don't want to come, put it in writing, they don't respond, they respond, they come. I think the other thing that the schools also must do, they must have their own internal psychologists, or maybe their internal social workers, so that also that will work. I don't want to say they must have their own sangomas. No, I'm scared of that. Let parents deal with that. Also, but try to assist in that process of what is actually going on. Now, as I've already mentioned, Department of Education, only 7 stakeholders. It's very easy to deal with this. Let's assume, for instance, what I'm doing now was done by the MEC of Education. So the MEC says, everybody must go to a webinar, the unions, the teachers, the whatever, As we are speaking now, maybe the MEC will be talking to about 2,000 people. Done, one time. But because they go there under what I call the deployment policy, they are getting deployed, but they've never been teachers. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're supposed to do. And then the teacher at the end of the day is supposed now to teach the child. All what we talk about in this country is numbers. 96% pass rate, 69% pass rate. But are we producing quality or quantity? There's a problem.
Absolutely pertinent points, Professor. And a lot of what you said is what we as NAPTOSA have been echoing continuously with the department, both provincially and nationally. And it's actually a great pity I'm listening to you speak about the MEC. Had I known what you had said today, we would have invited you over to our managers conference, which took place last Friday, where the MEC was actually present and did address our members as well. We would have given you an opportunity to engage with her. Nevertheless, I've been looking at some questions and I found some common factors where we've got educators who are concerned that because they are coming from different cultural backgrounds, that they face it as a challenge when they need to address ancestral callings and cultural sensitivities at their schools. You know, there are cases where we have schools where primarily the educators are from a different cultural heritage that are dealing with African and perhaps Zulu learners and need to know how to manage this sensitively. And then the other one, Prof, is with regard, I've got Junaid from the Western Cape who's asked a pertinent one. He says a lot of their learners, especially the African learners, are from the isiXhosa background and not Zulu. So how then do they deal with it? Is it very similar, or are there differences in terms of the culture?
Okay, let me deal with the last one. Whether you are Xhosa, Pedi, Venda, or Tswana, or whatever, is the same. My isigodlo gets visited by people all over South Africa because of the program I have on SABC1 and also on Ukhozi FM. Some of them, they come here, Tswana, they can't even speak isiZulu, but I assist them, I help them, because the only difference is that what kind of an animal do you use when you do these rituals? Others they use a sheep, others they use a goat. So whether you're Xhosa or whatever is the same. And also it bounces back to the national policy, to the policy of the national department. If they have got it, this is how it's addressed. Therefore now the Eastern Cape, the KwaZulu-Natal will actually adopt it in this fashion and add according to its own challenges and so on. But at the end of the day, it addresses one and the same issue. Now, coming to the educators, you know, as I'm sitting here, I studied all, let me not say all, but most of the world religions. And as I spend most of the time here in KZN, I have friends and discussions, and I attended their rituals, the Islamic people. And some of the people were shocked when I say there are huge similarities between African religion and Islamic religion. I know of Hindu religion, you know, Buddhism, whatever religion. It's up to an individual. How do you carry yourself, and what is it that you want in this world? For me, as Mkhize, I said to myself, there's a great lot that I can learn from other people in terms of their belief system, in terms of their religions, in terms of their backgrounds, in terms of all those sorts of things. I was a teacher. So to me, the challenge of a teacher is that a teacher must do the same thing as well. A teacher must be a researcher and a scholar, which will result not to a knowledgeable person, but to a wisdom person. Once you are a wisdom person, you become an intellectual. We call you a wise man, an intellectual. So that's what I think should be preached to teachers. You know, by being a teacher, a Xhosa teacher, an African-speaking teacher, an Indian teacher, I come in there as a Zulu teacher. I can learn a lot from you guys in terms of religion, in terms of language, in terms of this and so on and so on. When we said, let the 24th of September or September be the Heritage Month, I think that was the meaning of saying, this is the heritage. These are the things that we must actually work on. When we spoke of December 16th as the day of reconciliation, what are we reconciling? We are not reconciling that we must love one another and whatever. Let's reconcile the wealth and the depth of wisdom and knowledge that we have. In other words, if I visit your place and I sleep over, when I say goodbye in the morning, I must say, yes, if I wouldn't have slept there, I wouldn't have known this. That must be an attitude of our own people, not only teachers. So therefore, schools, I think that's what must actually be done and believed as well. To me, a school and a church and the community are the most instruments or structures that must actually work and heal the nation.
Thanks, Prof. I've been feeling through the questions, and I find that there are now a lot of similarities with what has been asked. We've actually responded to a number of them, but one that's come up just now, and Prof, before I pose these questions to you, I'm having a look at the clock as well. Perhaps we'll just take just 2 more rounds of questions and then allow you an opportunity to round up and close up and summarize as well. All right, so the question from Happy Chalker is, why is it that these callings affect girls more than boys? That's actually a very interesting one, because it's come up even in our office discussions during the course of today.
Yes, definitely. Yes, yes.
And the other one, Chair, is that when it comes to staff, now we just had a question about educators from different cultural backgrounds having trouble trying to deal with these ancestral callings. But there has been a question from one of the attendees that says, what happens when educators from the same cultural background are not accepting that the learners are experiencing these ancestral callings?
Thank you. Calling to more girls than men. Yes, that's a very great question. You know, initially, even when I grew up, you could not easily find a men's sangoma. The man used to be an inyanga, ugedla, somebody who will know just the herbs and heal and whatever, but not to go and ugutwasa. Remember that in the in ugutwasa, we have different categories. We have sangoma, we have abalozi, we have what sanusi, like credo mutwa, we have mhlahli, we have mbelethisi, we have ugedla, and so on and so on. Now, males used to be ugedla. It's only nowadays where you can find a male also being in sangoma. Sangomas actually used to be females. Why females? Because it used to be the softest targets from the ancestors. And because females are actually people who get married and be transferred to another family, you will find that my family will need something that they never had, but they will look for a woman that has got that, and they will use one of the men in the family to marry that woman in order to bring that. So the answer is that yes, it used to be more girls and is still continuing to be more girls today. But it is now affecting males as it affected people like us. On the other side, on educators having the same background, denying this. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I must say this. Education, for me, must be a tool that helps you to know who you are. Education mustn't dilute you. Particularly we as African people, Black people, it's so easy to find a person saying, no, I'm a professor, I've got 5 PhDs and all those stuff. To me, that means nothing. Education, those degrees are given to you to assist the nation, to help the nation, to leave the legacy or a certain message. Let's go back to the people like Plato, Aristotle, Socrates, Hippocrates, Pythagoras. They were learned, but we have got a name to their university. It was Pythagoras' Isikor, palace. We have got today academia. It was Plato's palace. Because those people, they were learned, but through their education, they healed the nation. They were not arrogant with their education. What we find today is that learned people, they actually boast with their education. At the end of the day, one of the professors said to me, Mkhize, what is the use of being a professor? You think by being a professor, but at the end of the day, when you are dead, you're just dead, you just die like an ordinary man on the street. But you haven't left anything. So all what I'm trying to say here is that, yes, educators, learned as they may be, they cannot agree on that. But why are they not researching on that? To me, an educated person is a person who lives on research, who lives on an objective, open mind, in order to find the unusual from the usual. For me, if you are an educated person as a professor or you have got PhDs, you are an abnormal person. From that abnormality, you must find the abnormal that will make the normal to be understood by the community. So it's a lot of things that we must actually try to work on here. There are a lot of, that is why I even mourn about our universities, that our universities are not teaching wisdom, but they are teaching knowledge. We must be able now to make knowledge be wisdom. As always, Professor Maxwell always alludes in most of his books, like in one of his books where he says from knowledge to wisdom. So universities are actually not teaching what is of value to people and what really will make people to be value to the nation and also to themselves and their people at large.
Thanks, Prof. This is the final round of questions before I'll allow you to summarize. The first question is actually going to be my own question to you. As I've noted that from the inception of this webinar, we've been using inverted commas, or we've been using the term so-called ancestral calling. Prof, the question is, what exactly are we referring to here? Are we being insensitive by even using inverted commas or saying so-called ancestral calling? That is the first one. The second is more of a comment than a question, but it's from one of the attendees who says, as educators, we are not trained to assist parents and with cultural and religious issues. I think we can take that as a fact. And furthermore, this member is saying, as a Christian, I truly don't want to get involved in this, as it's clashing with my own beliefs. Therefore, what can I do to move forward in this way? And the last question, Prof. As you know, we are well into assessment and examination season, and we are pretty much on the cusp of the final exams and the NSC. What advice would you give to schools and school principals to ready themselves and to address the learners so that we can, as far as possible, manage any situations that may arise with regard to the ancestral calling? Thanks, Prof.
Look, let me start with not trained. Yes, teachers are not trained how to handle these things, of which that should now start to come into the picture. The Department of Education must try to address that. Now, also, he says he's a Christian. He doesn't want to get involved with this. Yes, I agree with him 100%. We have to respect a person's religion and also his belief system. But I think for him to get out of this, he must, first of all, respect it, that it's happening to another person. If he's a Christian, I'm sure he knows Jesus Christ's principles, that you must not judge. And he must actually take it to the school principal and say, principal, here is an issue that I'm faced with. Can you call the parents, and then we talk with the parents? And he mustn't be scared. He must tell the parents that, look, this is what I'm finding. And to me, it's new, it's peculiar, it's unique, but I'm a Christian. I don't know it. I don't understand it, but I don't want to be involved because I don't know it. I don't understand it. So long as you can assist me in trying to help the child so that she doesn't become or he becomes a problem in the class and disturbs other kids. That would be the amicable way of doing it. And then coming to the issue of so-called. Yes, I agree. So-called ancestral call. You know why it's called so-called? It is so-called because we are not too sure. As I've already said it in my opening. Then you start calling it's spiritual, it's ancestral calling once you are sure. So in other words, once a child has been declared by the ancestors and also has gone under the underway of being trained, initiated, and all, then we say it's ancestral calling. You know, in nowadays, it's easy for people to say, well, wherever I go, they say I've got ancestral callings, I've got the so-called whatever. That is right, because he or she is not yet sure. So once you are sure, say, look, I've got the ancestral calling. I've got the spiritual calling, which is easy as that. You know, maybe in my closing is that what I would say is, before I address the issue of the schools and so on, what to do as you're approaching the exams, is that, you know, it's very, very difficult, colleagues, in nowadays to be really sure that this is ancestral calling. There are a number of issues. When democracy came in, it came in and the number of parents, you know, rejected the things they were doing, all their cultural rituals, and also there were a lot of pastoral developments in the country. There were a lot of churches that developed in the countries, which were actually, others are money spinners, money making, and all those of things. We have heard in the news, people forced to drink petrol, people forced to eat grass. Now, what do you believe? You see, let's be realistic here. So it's very difficult now to say, what is it that is genuine? It's only you who must mind yourself and say, look, I must mind myself in terms of saying this is genuine, but let me assist, let me help. Like for instance, my daily work is on healing people, but most of the time I teach them, I advise them, and I've published books because I want to reduce the number of people who comes to me. My interest is to make people learn, is to make people understand who is who, and so on and so on. I was very fortunate at university that I did Afrikaans up to honors level. Now, when I start telling people about the African-speaking people, what we should have learned from them, they said, no, Mkhize still belong to apartheid. I said, no, wait. There's the greatness that we lost from those people that we should have learned. So similarly, amongst ourselves, at a school, you find a Xhosa, Pedi, Indian, white, whatever. We have to learn, you know, from all these individuals, because at the end of the day, it's so exciting to, you to know something that, oh, it happens like this, and this is how it's done, even though it's not my part of religion or my belief systems. Now, coming to the schools, I think here, the schools maybe must do this. They must actually, the principal must actually speak to the teachers that, look, if there is a child who happens to be affected by something similar to what we call ancestral calling, look, bring the child to the office. We will actually sit down, talk to the child to come back with the parents the following day. Speak to the parents and then see what the parents do. But also, the school must be straightforward to the parents that, look, if you don't want to assist the child, therefore, yes, we are the second parents to the child, but what do you expect us to do? We cannot allow your child to come and suffer here and also affect other kids at school and also be a burden to the teachers. So please, let's work together and also let's try to find ways and means of doing this. And then lastly, I'll request NAPTOSA to speak to the MEC of Education or the Minister of Education about this issue that, look, let's work on this. Let's not academize. No academics must come into this thing. Let's work it with these 7 stakeholders I've already alluded to or mentioned. Thank you.
Professor, on behalf of NAPTOSA, I want to say thank you so much for your invaluable information. We really value the opinions you've shared with us, the insight you've shared with us. And as I indicated from all of the questions that we've been fielding, there were lots of similarities. They are educators that we are dealing with, and we acknowledge you as educators. And we also want to share the sentiments of some of the attendees who said, thank you very much for making yourself available to address the topic at hand. With that, Professor, we want to say thank you very much. Your request to speak with the MEC or with the Department of Education is duly noted, and I will be taking that up with our supervisors as well. So we look forward to working with you in the future, and thank you once again. To those of you who joined us on a Friday afternoon, thank you for your questions. We have noted all of your questions, and we are interacting with the professor if we need to, and we want to say thank you and enjoy a wonderful Heritage Day holiday tomorrow. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And also maybe in closing, I must actually say that I've got the funding already. Umsamo Institute, we are working at getting a school. As we know that in some parts of, I don't know, other provinces, KZN, the government is actually, department is closing certain schools, and we are saying to them, give us one of those schools, which would be a project, an experimental school, where we will actually admit all the kids who have got this ancestral calling, try to help them, not in terms of initiating them, but assisting parents and so on. So that's what actually I'm currently working on.
Excellent, and we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
With that, good afternoon, Prof, and good afternoon to everyone. Enjoy your weekend ahead.
Thank you.
Cheers.